Welcome to the Process Podcast.
From new agent to broker owner.
My name is Travis McClure. This is my co-host, Preston Guyton. Welcome to the Process Podcast. This is Travis McClure with my co-host, Preston Guyton. Preston, how you doing today, sir?
Good, man. Can't complain.
Man, what have you been reading lately? You tell me about this book you've been reading.
So yeah, another good thing about running is I never really listened to audible books. I would read, when I was flying somewhere or whatever, I'd read, but I've been listening to audibles since I started running about a month and a half ago, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So the one I just finished was Relentless. Just finished that this morning.
Tim Grover.
Yep.
What do you think about that book?
It was really good. I mean, it went from probably the best audible I ever listened to, although that's a limited amount,
Right.
Endure, but it was good. It was different than, Endure, but it was still a really good book.
So Relentless, I listened to that probably 2 years ago, maybe. It breaks people down into different categories, right? It's like a cleaner, a closer. What's the other one?
It's cooler,
That's it.
closer, cleaner.
Cooler, closer, cleaner. One thing I remember like stuck out to me about that book, Preston, like the cleaners, they're like you can give sport analogies and you can use them in business, but they're your Michael Jordans, Kobe Bryant's. They're the people when the game's on the line, you want them to have the ball in their hands. They're the ones that aren't going to wait. They're going to take action in a business setting, right? They're
Yes,
those people.
100%. Yeah, and they're not going to be loud about it. You know what I mean? They like Pat Riley was another one he talked about. And like a lot of times you'll see people in, celebration after a win, and a lot of people will be celebrating. And then you see the person over there, it's almost, they're kind of subdued and, and almost in the corner and celebrating, but not like a lot of the other ones. And so that's the thing with a cleaner. They typically, they don't celebrate very long and they're already thinking about what they're doing next.
Interesting story about Tim Grover, the author, that he's the trainer, quote, I'm using air quotes, the trainer for like, say, Kobe Bryant. But it wasn't like physical trainer. Yeah, he did physical training with them, but it was a lot of mental, basically coaching.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, when somebody hires them, like he says, it's 365 days a year, 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Whenever they need them, they call them. Sometimes they slide away and fly up to Chicago to his gym and spend time with them. And sometimes it's not physical. Sometimes it is physical, but he said a lot of times it's mental. It has to get people out of the headspace they're in.
I think about John Cheplack's kind of like your Tim Grover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Interesting about that book too. Like you say, you talk about the cleaner. I always think about cleaners. It made me think like that. I'm going to use the word and I'm probably wrong using it. You can correct me, but like, they're like an extreme personality. They're like a David Goggins would be a cleaner to me. Maybe even Cameron Haynes, where it's like they achieve and they just keep, that's not good enough. They're just, what's next? Right. It's like, what's next? What's next?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've in coaching with John Cheplack, there's a lot of cleaners in that crowd, that
Right.
are never happy with where they're at. They're always, they're happy with where they're at, but as far as like they never feel like, they're at the top level. They could always push through it. And closer is different than cleaner. Cleaner usually they don't complain about things. Where the closer would be somebody that would complain and they would have a loud voice and all that. But he compared it to like LeBron James would be a closer and then Michael Jordan would be a cleaner.
Yeah.
Which you think about that, like you never really heard, playing days of Michael Jordan. He wasn't very vocal in the press. He wasn't complaining about getting hurt or falling down or somebody touching him. It's a total different player.
Yeah, and to use the word of the title, Relentless. And did Tim Grover work with Michael Jordan as well? I don't remember.
He did, yeah. So that was the first big name he worked with. He kept applying to sending letters to all the players from Chicago Bulls and, sent them to everybody other than Michael Jordan because obviously he didn't think he had a chance. He's like, I've never coached any athlete. And he, the trainer called him one day and invited him to Michael Jordan's house and they talked. And then, he didn't know what was going to happen. And a week later, called him again, showed up at his house. I think that's the way it went. And, he didn't know why he was going there. And Michael was like, okay, I want to hire you. And, the rest is history. I think he worked with him 15 years.
Yeah. talking to you about that book makes me want to. I'd love to go back and re-listen to
Yeah.
books because that I do recall that's Relentless by Tim Grover. Great book.
Yeah, it's funny. Like the story, the ending story when, Michael Jordan retired and, he told him, he goes, if I ever see you in my neighborhood again, I'm gonna effing shoot your ass. So, they had a good relationship, but
Yeah,
he pushed him and that's what
yeah.
he did. I mean, when players would go see him and he would push them to the limit or past their limit where a lot of them were throwing up and everything else. But like he worked with Wade as well. And, when Dwayne Wade had the knee injury and everything else he was going through the playoffs,
Mhm.
he went down and helped him. And he's like, I can't fix your knee, but I could help you with your knee where you could finish the playoffs and you're going to end up needing surgery. But, if you work with me and listen to me, I could get you where you could at least finish the series.
Yeah, I think about cleaners. We say a lot on this show. Cleaners to me, they seek out people who are going to tell them what they need to hear. They're not looking to be around people that tell them what they want to hear,
That's right.
right? And we're I believe a closer or a what's the other term?
Cooler.
Coolers seek out comfort, right? That's
Yes.
typically it. But all right, Preston, let's jump into our episode today. Let's talk about the market. Some news yesterday about the economy. We're gonna use the R word in this episode.
I think they changed the definition. We've changed a lot of definitions in the United States over the last 3 years, 2 years, it seems. We're not going to get into that, but it seems like we've changed a lot of definitions of who we are and what we are and everything else. But yeah, I guess the past definition of recession, which is still the definition of recession based on the news yesterday, we're in a recession,
Yeah.
which I think a lot of people, and we talked about this a month ago, that we pretty much already knew what the data was going to come out and prove that we're in a recession. But like I shared yesterday, I mean, just do what you do,
Right.
focus on what you're doing instead of the headlines and everything else. So we're in a recession. So what? How's that going to affect you on your daily life? Keep pushing through and keep focusing on you and let's stop talking about it and get to work.
What are they talking about in terms of interest rates? I mean, that does directly impact our business somewhat. What are they saying? What are they expecting for the rest of the year in terms of interest rates, which are impacted by inflation, right?
Yeah. So they raised 3/4 of a point yesterday. So that was raised. Federal rate was raised yesterday, announced. It didn't really have much. It had a little bit of movement in the 30-year rate yesterday. But really, what those are going to affect are like the investment accounts. And when I say investment accounts, like the business lines of credit, majority of home equity lines of credit are based on that number. So it's, prime plus 1% or whatever it is. So you're going to see that where it starts affecting people, especially if say they have a lot of debt on their HELOC. There's going to be, their payment just went up, 2% roughly in the past 3, 4 months, 5 months.
So it's going to create some demand to sell. But I think the good thing to think about, I think anybody our age, like 40 and over, we kind of think back to 2007. I feel like a lot of people I talk to about my age, they were somehow impacted. Most people in our generation were somehow impacted 2007, 2008, and they kind of see that looming. And where I think this is a lot different, yes, you have some stuff creating seller demand. There's still an awful lot of buyer demand out there as well. At least we're seeing that in our market.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, somewhat market specific, right? You're going to see slowdowns in certain areas more so than others, but I think that's more tied to, how crazy did the prices get?
Yes.
Some markets, the prices went up, 2 to 3x over the last, 4 or 5 years or whatever it is. But I mean, like our market's still affordable. It's going to be based on, we have people every day that have to buy, right? So we have, healthcare is a big industry in our market because a lot of the people that move here 60 years old and older, and they have to go see doctors and that they see healthcare providers and everything else. So the demand is always going to be there because people need to move, people need to sell houses to take new jobs, people need to buy houses to, and the rental market here, like many other markets, is expensive and there's really not a whole lot of rentals out there. So I think we'll see a slowdown, but what I tell some of the realtors too, you're going to see a lot of people drop out of this business. So less realtors, less sales, commissions not pushed down so much to where, people want you to list their house for 3% or whatever that percentage is. I think you'll see more, higher commissions and less sales, but you also have less real estate agents.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about that. And you said it at the beginning. of this conversation is focus on what you can control, focus
Yep.
on what you can. We talk a lot about there's the market and then there's our market, and our market's different. And then when I say our, I mean Palms Realty, our agents, because we're taking action,
Yeah.
right? We're not just sitting back and letting it happen to us.
That's right. Yeah, and you keep moving forward and keep taking action. Even in 2007, 8, 9. I mean, when you got to change and trans maybe move in different directions, but there's always opportunity in a changing market. It's just you got to quickly realize what you got to do and move towards that new direction. And like I said, there's opportunity in every scenario.
Yeah. The 7, 8, 9, there's agents that and companies that grew great businesses.
Yeah.
It happened, right? Because they took a lot of action. And I thought it was interesting, Preston, this past week, every Wednesday, we do a sales meeting in our company with all our agents. And last half of that sales meeting, we did basically a mastermind session because I thought it was pretty interesting. We've had a really good month as a company, right? We've had agents having a lot of success, and there's agents also kind of feeling the change in the market. So I feel like if you're gonna have a mastermind session, no better time than any to let's talk about what challenges we're having and what's going well. And essentially, those are the two questions we ask. Um, and the first challenge that came up, I wanted to break a few of them down with you, was just showing your value at a listing appointment, right? You go to a listing appointment and somebody wants you to charge 1% on that listing side or 3% total or whatever that looks like. I thought that was interesting. That was the first challenge that was brought up.
Yeah, I mean, it's you got to continue showing value, and if you believe your values, at a certain percentage or whatever it is, I mean, sometimes you're gonna have to say no.
Mhm.
Sometimes you're gonna have to say no to those listings and just continue doing because you know how much time you spend in it, right? Like if somebody's charging a less of a commission, maybe they're willing to do it for less money, or maybe they're just not offering the same things you're offering. I think you just continue to provide value and show what you can do. And, basically sometimes you're gonna have to say no. Sometimes you're
Yeah.
gonna have to say no to taking a listing. And, that's not the end of the world. I mean, there's always if you continue to do the work and can you continue to move forward, there's gonna be more opportunities out there. So it's like, don't jump on every listing just because you feel like you have to.
I think one of the things that was talked about in the mastermind session, and I've, when I taught teach and train agents around listings, there's really a threefold approach around that. Number one is your mindset. Cost is only really an issue in the absence of value. And I always use the example of, what kind of car do you drive? Right? There's Teslas in the parking lot. You can absolutely get a much cheaper car, but somebody saw value in that Tesla, right? So have that mindset of, whatever I'm up against, whether it be that value brand listing company, I show value, and I challenge the agent to go back and look at that value brand listing company. What's their percentage of listings that have sold in the last year? Maybe it's 60, 70, 80%. What's yours? Yours is probably like 97 or 98%. Number one, you cause homes to sell. So you show value. Number two is be able to speak to the market, be able to speak to what's happening in their neighborhood around price. That builds confidence in them to work with you versus somebody who just goes in and says, well, what do you want to list the price at? Okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
If you can speak intelligently about what's causing homes to sell from a pricing perspective, that's going to build confidence in them to work with you, which increases your value. And then the last part is you got to go in with a rock solid, I think, marketing plan. What are you going to do to make sure that house was adequately exposed to the buyer market, right? Whether it's an open house plan, whether it's using websites like Easy Home Search, whether it's leveraging your buyer database, go in there with a one sheet or whatever that looks like and be able to speak to your marketing plan. You got to be able to show a tremendous amount of value, and that's how you overcome that.
Yeah, for sure.
The other challenge they talked about, kind of along the same lines, was seller expectation around price, which I think is pretty interesting because, right, there's a lots of talk about the economy, there's lots of talk about the real estate market. And I think it's interesting because Preston, and that's been a challenge I've heard agents say over the last month or so, where a lot of times people will hear what they want to hear. A lot of times sellers are still in this mindset of like, it's a hot market. I can charge, well, last house sold for this. I'm just going to increase my price 20%. And we're going to throw it out there and I'm going to get it. And even in our market where there's still some buyer demand, the market's saying no to these overpriced homes. What are your thoughts around that? Managing seller expectation?
Yeah, I mean, really, and the same thing, like you said, just know the data and know the market. I mean, like we're seeing many, many more price reductions now. And what does that tell us? Not that the market's necessarily slowing down. It shows us that people are not willing to pay those prices. So,
Mhm.
you're starting to see a lot more price reduction. So when you go into those meetings with clients, show them that and then show them, if you overprice it, show them the data that shows that most likely they're going to get less than what they would have gotten if they priced it accordingly from the beginning. Just showing that data and helping them and educating them, whether a lot of them hear it from their neighbor or friends down the road that, we listed our house and it sold in 6 days and we
Mhm.
had 14 offers. Sure, that might have happened 3 months ago. It's not happening as much now. In the days of, listing a house and, oh, this one sold 2 months ago. Let's raise the price by 5 or 10%.
Right.
And the next house would sell. I mean, those days they're gone. I mean, they're not happening. We see it, especially in the condos around here. You're starting to see it, the prices start to come down quite a bit.
Yeah, or especially when there's 6 or 7 units listed in the same building where a year ago there was none, right?
Yeah, I mean, even months ago, right? So you go back
Yeah.
to January, February, March, we were, pulling up oceanfront condos, buildings, there may be one or two listings, and now there's like 20,
Mhm.
15 or whatever. I mean, it tells me that it's, there's still buyers out there. There's still people looking for those types of properties. They're just not willing to pay those prices.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing when you're talking to sellers, price should never be your opinion. Once they give you an opinion and now you're trying to battle them back with opinion, I guarantee you're going to lose that battle almost every time, right? It's just opinion versus opinion, and they're going to think they're right. Price should always be based around facts and data. You should bring your solds with you. What is the market said yes to in their neighborhood or their building? What you bring expireds and withdrawn, if there's any. There might not be any, and if there's not, that's when you leverage days on market of actives, right? So you
Yep.
bring that information with you as well. And they're trying to price way up here, and there's statistical data that shows when someone's tried to do that, they've expired or withdrawn, or somebody's trying to do that and they've sat on the market for 6 months and had to take 5 price reductions. You use that data to your advantage. That's not your opinion, that's data. And you say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, listen, we can try that. But let me ask you this: how does that affect you and your family if your house is still on the market 6 months from now?
Yep.
That's the question to ask, right? Um, the other opportunity agents were talking about in our meeting, Preston, which I thought it's not new. I've heard it before. On the buyer side. A lot of buyers out there want to sit on the sidelines and they say, "Hey, we're just waiting on the market to crash," which I think is a pretty interesting one. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah. There's going to be people that have to buy though. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
there's going to be the ones that, you're not going to necessarily be able to talk them into buying. Like if they're hell bent on the market's going to crash and they're
Right.
reading the headlines and everything else, it really goes to, where they're at. What do they need to achieve? When do they need to buy?
Hmm.
Does it really make more sense to rent for a year or two and have nothing to show for it, or buy where they could still buy and a lot of times pay less for a house than it would be to rent and have no equity based on renting for the 2 years or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point. Like if you're rents have gone way up, like way higher than what like home prices have. Like so,
Yeah.
if you're renting, let's say a I don't know 4 bedroom house in our market for $3,000 a month. And yeah, I get like you're waiting on this and interest rates are high, but like if you or higher, I should say, if you can go out, if we can go out and find you like the same house and have a mortgage payment for $2,000 a month, right, or something
Yeah.
like that, you're saving $1,000 a month, right? Like for the average family, I know there's a lot of people who go out there and pay cash or do this or do that, but for the average family, $1,000 a month is a lot of money, or five
Yeah.
hundred dollars a month is a lot of money. You can always remortgage the house 5 years down the road if interest rates go the other direction, right? I mean, $1,000 a month is a lot of money to save. And I think you talk about that, but also a question to overcome that objection. I've heard some agents in our office use very skillfully is, well, where did you get that information from? I believe Bill Pipes talks about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Jason Devlin said it in our office as well. A lot of times they're just hearing it through somebody that has no knowledge of it,
Hmm.
and give them, educate them, and send them the data we see and everything else. And if they're just, like I said, hell bent on that's the way they feel, and they think they're going to get a house for 20 or 30% 6 months from now, which I don't see that happening. But
Yeah.
you can only educate somebody and see what the response is, and if they still have, oh, we're going to wait, then you can't force them to do it, right? So
And then we jumped over in our meeting. We started talking about, hey, what's going well? So we've had some agents have some really good months this past month. Obviously, proactively calling in a database, lead generation, lots of different sources out there. I know for our agents, Easy Home Search is a great one. We have some that do some Red X prospecting, just calling just listed, just sold. But it was interesting. The first hand that shot up and the first response we got to what's going well is good old fashioned and tried and true sphere of influence.
yeah.
What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the people that you've sold to in the past are, really the easiest one to sell again. I mean, most likely you had a good relationship with them, everything went well. I think it's 80 or 90% of people say they would use the agent again. So definitely reach out to them because a couple things, and you shared it as well.
Mhm.
Since 2020, a majority of the people that buy houses bought something that they felt like they were forced to buy because the market was so crazy. So it
Right.
didn't necessarily fit their square footage they needed. It didn't maybe fit the location they wanted. A lot of those obviously have a lot of equity in those houses now.
Mhm.
So if they were to sell, they could move to something else, maybe more desirable, more what they wanted. So it's a good time to reach out to people, even if they bought a year or two ago.
Yeah.
It's a good, and you should always do that, right? But especially now, if you're worried about the market, I mean, hop on the phone, reach out, stop by. I mean, which clients you could, call and stop by and bring them breakfast or coffee or whatever, just do something to stay in front of them, get in front of them. And you'd be surprised. And maybe they're not selling, but they know somebody, that is. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's 10% roughly is what they say. If you do a good job of following up and staying in front of the people have sold in the past, that you should be able to pull about 10% of what you sold a year the following year.
Yeah, that's the number. So let's just say you have 100 past clients that you've sold homes to in the last 5 years. You should expect, like when you're sitting down making a business plan for the next year, and you should expect 10,
Yeah.
right? 10 past clients, sphere of influence, that's referrals, whatever. If the number is far below that, then it's a pretty good indicator that you're not doing a great job reaching out to them. But it was interesting. An agent told a story about, hey, I reached out to some clients I sold a house to year and a half, 2 years ago too. They were happy to hear from me. And all I asked them was, how you guys liking the house? How you liking the neighborhood? And they had moved here, like a lot of clients in our market move here sight unseen, right? They're not as 100% familiar with the Myrtle Beach area, right? We're a big transplant market and they love Myrtle Beach, but they don't like the area that they're in, right? Or the house was too small. I forget the gist of the story, and they were ready to find something else. And he said, "Well, let's do that." So got a listing out of it, and now he's helping them find a new home.
Yep.
And these are people that, like you said, had a very stressful buying experience in 2021 or 2020, where it was house would hit the market and there's like 15 offers on it, and you had to give your highest and best, and you were kind of rushed into making a decision. That's not the landscape of what's happening right now. If you're a buyer right now in this market, there's inventory available. Yes, interest rates are a little bit higher, but you're not getting outbid. You can kind of take your time to make the good and best decision for your family. And that stat that's thrown out there that I've seen, it's 60% of buyers who've bought a home since 2020 say that in some way, shape, or form that home does not suit their family's needs. Meaning, like the realtor, did not do a bad job in helping them find that home. They were just rushed by the market to make a decision and give their highest and best offer. And now they're having a little bit of buyer's remorse, like the home's not big enough, the yard's not big enough, the neighborhood doesn't quite suit them, whatever that is. So it's a good time to reach out. And the agent said it without me even saying that stat. He said, I just asked them, how they're liking the house, how's the neighborhood, and I got all that out of them. And now, a week later, I listed their house and I'm helping them find a new one. It's worth going through. 60% of the people you sold a house to in the last 2 years are in that boat.
Yeah.
So think about that.
Yeah. And so they get a listing out of it and they buy something else. So that's amazing. I mean, do that 5 or 10 times and you'll be pretty happy.
Another thing that was spoken about, and I thought is both cool and interesting, that it came up in things that are going well, is just keeping people up to date. I've fascinated with and interested in the last year or so. I feel like I always say, like, customer service has reached like an all-time low. I don't care if you go to a restaurant, everything's very automated. If a lot of times you don't even deal with people, everything's through an app, right? And I think everybody's so busy in terms of the real estate market. Restaurants have been understaffed for a year or two, right? So like there's not a lot of expectations around service. And he said just taking a buyer through a transaction that kind of ran over a little bit and just reaching out to them, just checking on them,
Yeah, I
seeing if
mean,
they needed anything.
over communicating is better than the not communicating enough. And I talked about that as well. Like on
Mhm.
my trip to Vegas, the first flight I got on, we got on the plane and they said, oh, it'll be 10 or 15 minutes. And then we didn't hear from 'em for another 30 minutes. It'd be 5 or 10 minutes. And then we didn't hear from 'em for another 30 minutes. So we're on the plane for like an hour and 15 minutes. We maybe got two updates. And
Mhm.
that's what I mentioned there as well. You had some people getting pretty upset.
Right.
And I feel like if they would have communicated a little more and instead of getting on every 30 minutes, then it'll be another 5 or 10 minutes. We didn't be on the plane for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
So that's just something as simple as getting on there that, hey, they're still working through it. They don't really have an update of how long it's going to be, and then people could, because I ended up missing my next flight. Luckily, American Airlines was able to get me on another flight, which was about 2 hours later. But I mean, even in that situation, like if they would have just communicated a little bit more instead of, not giving updates, something as simple as just hopping on there, we're working through it. We're really not sure how long it's going to be or, that, how long it's going to be or whatever, but they didn't do that.
I'll give you the real estate example. I coach agents do that all the time. Like a newer agent will call me and be like, "Hey, the closing got delayed. Like my buyer's already kind of upset about it. They thought we're going to close today. They expecting to move out of this house in New York, whatever." And as an agent, sometimes you're kind of powerless, right? Like you're waiting on something from an attorney, you're waiting on something from a lender. And the best, you're kind of the go between. You're calling the lender, you're calling the attorney, and then the only thing you really can do is supply your client information. And sometimes you don't even have any information, right? Like there's no update. That's what I tell, and you said it. That's why I tell agents you go into over communication mode,
Yeah.
right? Over communication mode. I'm calling that client every day, and they're gonna know when they're gonna hear from me next, right? Like, hey, I haven't gotten an update from the lender. The lawyer told me this was we're still waiting on XYZ, but I just want to call, reach out to you, give you that information. Honestly, I just want to see if there's anything else I could do for you. Is there anything you guys need right now? Right? Hey, when I hear back from lender or lawyer, regardless if I hear back from them, I'm going to give you a call back at 8 o'clock tonight, or I'm going to give you a call back at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Just giving them that little bit of certainty of when they're going to hear from you next calms people down.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's all they want in that situation. That's all
Yeah,
you wanted sitting on
yeah,
the
for
plane.
sure, and just be honest, right?
Right.
I mean, just be honest. I mean, don't try to make a story up to make it sound better. A lot of times that'll get you in trouble. Just be
Mhm.
honest with the situation, and if you messed up or whatever, just share that information. I think you would see a lot more people a lot happier if you over communicate and share with honesty and share what's going on.
Yeah. The other thing I always teach and train agents around is once a week you should have your list of everything that's pending, right? A list of everybody that's listed, right? Basically the clients you're working with right now. And this should be time block. Something you do is every week you go through that list and you're calling each one of them with an update of some sort. Number one complaint people have about their realtor, typically Preston, is my realtors didn't contact me. I never hear from them. I have to call them. And one of our agents actually said it really well. He goes, I know if a client calls me because I didn't contact them, I know I'm not doing a good job taking care of them. That's usually an indicator that I'm not doing a good job. But I think a way you can add some certainty to that process is when first start working with somebody, I tell them, listen, every Monday morning, I go through my list of everybody who's on the market or any buyers I'm working with that are under contract, and I call and give them some sort of update. Would that be like, hey, we got no showings this weekend. Just wanted to call and see how everything, touch base, see how everything's going. And then you always end the conversation with, is there anything that I can do for you?
Yep.
Right? Always end the conversation. Is there anything that I could do for you? A couple things that does. Number one, if you remain a resource, even if you don't have any new information, like maybe they need a number to a fence person for when they move in the house, whatever that looks like, you can easily get them that number and keep them flow with them and keep them happy. When it comes to the end of that transaction, where it's time to get a review, right? We're a review based economy. Everybody Googles you before they or Facebook searches you before
Yep.
they work with you. This is where that comes in the play where it's like you kept in constant communication and exceeded expectations in customer service. That's how you do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one complaint you see the most often is communication and lack of communication. And if they just do that part, I mean, it'll make the transaction and the experience so much better. And the one thing you talk about SOIs, you know, when you interview or when people are interviewed and they're asked like, why didn't you use the agent that sold you the house? And one of the most accurate responses or most the one we hear the most is I can't even remember my agent's name.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
Like I can't remember their name. So I couldn't use them again if I wanted to because I can't remember their name.
Yeah. That's pretty incredible. So, guys, just want to leave you one last thought. Kind of like I guess the mantra of what we talked about today is the market's getting hard. That's not a bad thing. You just make it your market. Go into the office every day or your home office, whatever it is, and do the work. Make the contacts. Find the people that want to do real estate transactions because they're definitely out there. Find them and talk to them.
Yeah, and turn off the media and stop reading the headlines. I mean, yes, we're in a recession. It shouldn't change what you do on a daily basis. Focus on what you're doing. Focus on, you know, what you're getting done. And that's what matters, right? Let's get out of this recession by getting back to work, putting in the work and doing what we need to do. And stop listening to a government that continues to change definitions on things that have been the way they have been for 100 years.
Yeah, just turn the news off.
Yeah, turn the news off.
Listen to
Stop.
audiobooks and call your
And
clients.
podcasts.
Yeah, audiobooks, podcasts, and call your clients. I'm sometimes so disconnected from news. Is a funny way to end it, but that like Kim will be like, "Hey, did you see such and such happen?" Even
Yeah.
like local news, and I'm like, "Nope." Like the apocalypse could be happening, and I have no idea that's happening.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm the same way. I don't pay attention. See it on social media sometimes, but I don't even click on them. My wife will do the same thing. I'm like, no, I didn't see that.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, have a great rest of your week. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Noah.
Make sure to smash that like button and subscribe.
All right. Have a great day, guys.